So in this video, I'm going to show you what 3D formulas are, and then some other formulas that can go beyond the limitations of 3D formulas. But before we do that, let's take a look at what we have here. We have 4 sheets. This is sheet month 1. We have department here. We have these different labels, data 1 through 8, going to the right, and then we have our numbers. The same thing in month 2. And sheet month 3 and sheet month 4. You see how the numbers are different and we have different text over here. So they're not identical, but the structure is the same. Now let's take a look at this. In a perfect world, you would never have your data sort of structured like this. First of all, you'd copy it all into one sheet, and then you'd translate it from this layout into a normalized layout like we have over here. Every piece of information is a separate column, so every field is a different column. We have the month and the department. That's the same as what we have over here. But all of this stuff, data 1, data 2, data 3, that would be repeated down the column, and then the number would go with it. Because really, we only have 2 things here: the data number and the data value. Here we have it split across to the right. So this is called normalizing your data or unwinding it. This is what you'd have sort of in a pivot layout, the output of your data. But to store it, you'd want to have it like this. Now, of course, the data goes off the screen. We have to scroll down to see all of it. But this is much easier to analyze. It's not easier to see your data. That part is actually harder. So people like to do this approach. They put it across all these 4 sheets so they can see all of it right here. But really, to analyze this data with formulas or pivots or some kind of combination, it's always better to have it like in a database format like this. But that's not the reality of the world, and people do this kind of thing all the time. They spread it out so they can see it and think about it. So let's go to sheet 1. Here is the 3D range. Right here we're using the count function to count numbers from month 1 to month 4, and that includes whatever is in the middle, and we want to look at range B6 to B11. So I'm going to turn this on, and we see that the answer is 23. So if we look at B6 to B11, which is this exact range right here, across all 4 of these sheets, counting to see how many numbers we have 23 numbers. Now, we could also change that into a sum, to sum this same range in month 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's say we don't want to include month 3 anymore. Well, you'd have to take that sheet and drag it either to the right of month 4 or to the left of month 1. Then only month 2 would be between month 1 and month 4. All right. Let's click on these next 2 examples. We could also use the average function and the min function to get the lowest number, and this gets the average of all the numbers. So lots of things that you can do, but there are some limitations. This is the list. As far as I know, it's only these functions that can be used in 3D ranges, that is across different sheets. And so one of the limitations is this: how can we do counting or summing or averaging with an if? So now we have to, do some more complicated formulas. So let's keep this in mind. In the end, all we're doing is telling Excel we want to count with a condition that the numbers are greater than a certain value, but we have a range and we have a criteria. So let's look below here. Here's our Countif function, and we have all of this stuff in here. The indirect basically gives us that range. And then, of course, our criteria is composed of 2 parts: the operator, which is the greater than symbol, and the value of G7. So let's turn this on up here. We see 23. 23 means we're counting from month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, that range of B6 to B11. And the criteria is this cell right here, G7. So let's click inside of this. Is the actual formula here. Let's click inside of here. We see everything that's being used. So all the numbers that are greater than 1. Of course, we could go over here and change this. Watch that 23 change. If I say 200, press the Enter key. Now there's only 16 of them. Only 16 numbers across those 4 sheets in that range that are greater than 200. So there's one other thing in here we should take a look at. See where it says sheet list? Well, that's actually a named range, and that named range uses this cell right here to say we have 4 text values in here, so we're pulling in all 4 of those sheets: month 1, month 2, month 3, and month 4. So we'll quickly go here to formulas, name manager, and here is our sheet list. So we see the offset working right there. If I click this button, watch this area right here. It's all going to get highlighted. So that is our range. That is at least the part of our sheets. So with that, we're putting the ampersand and then B6 to B11. So that is going with each of these sheets. So let's just close this. And we will also look at two other things here. Here is the same thing, but we are summing instead of counting. So watch what happens to that. It's almost 27,000. If I change this back to 1, that will increase just over 27,000. Now this is actually a different way to do it. Here we have to wrap the whole thing with some product if we're doing Countif or if we're doing SUMIF. In this case, we're wrapping it with the sum function, and then we have to do Control-Shift-Enter to get those special brackets. So you might see something like this as well. But this is, I would say, the easier way to do it, because you go into the cell, you write everything, and you just press the Enter key. Here we have to go in here and press Control-Shift-Enter. All right, so let's look at the next part now, because how can we make it easier to toggle sheets off and on? Because over here we have to put them in here. What happens if we don't want month 2? Maybe we think that we can just clear this or delete it. Well, now nothing works. So let's undo that. We'd have to very carefully rearrange things. I mean, we could take off month 4 because it's the last one. Clear it. And everything still works. This says 3. But if we want to be able to take out things in the middle, switch things around, well, we'd have to do something else. So that will be in the next sheet. So here we are. Here is the next part that, of course, is going to be a little more complicated. We want to have that ease of being able to turn sheets off and on. So here we see I've included month 5. We don't even have a sheet that's called month 5. But let's say later on we're going to get that sheet. Maybe we have sheets month 1 all the way to month 30. And we want to very easily toggle them off and on. So this is a table structure. You can see maybe part at the top here where it says design, but this says table tools here at the top. But this is a structured data in a table, and this is data validation. I can turn these off and on at any point. Let's show the formula. Watch that 18. That is going to change. So I'm going to turn month 3 on, or off actually. That decreases. So now I'm going to turn them all on, and that 9 right there will increase. So we'll turn this one on. This one's going to go on, and we see that number now. It was 18, now it's 27, now it's 35. So let's turn a couple of these off again. Off and off. The next thing I want you to see is here's all the sheets listed. Here's the off and on, and I should have maybe a little dotted line here to sort of separate this. I probably should have done this. A little border. Let's click right in there. Maybe a dotted line, just to kind of separate these two things. But this is a table. When we add something new in here, if I add month 6 and I press tab, the table increases automatically. Our formula, it is also dragged down automatically by the table feature. So I will obviously turn this to off because month 6 doesn't even exist yet. So any sheet that doesn't exist, definitely want them to be off. But right now we have 2 sheets that are on, month 1 and month 3. So we look over here. This is getting longer, but let's take a look at this in detail. So here is the formula. Here is the formula text, which is the same as what we have down here. Now let's remember that in the end, all we're doing is creating a range, and for that range, a criteria that the values are greater than 1, or I could change this to be greater than 50. Or let's say 150 so that the 18 decreased down to 16. So all those numbers from the 2 sheets that we care about, month 1 and month 3 that we see over here, it's counting a range, and that range is still B6 to B100, and those values have to be greater than 150. All right, this is not easy to explain, so bear with me. So let's get back to this. How do we create that sheet list? Well, we have this number 2, this Countif is saying count anything. And that counts anything that is not an error. It could be text, it could be numbers, whatever is not an error. We see this nice structure here where it's saying this is table 3, the whole thing, and the field is field list. So it looks down here, no matter how big this is, how tall this is, it will count them. So you can just keep typing in or even pasting new months, and this will increase. It will expand automatically. Then just set everything to off or on. Now, in this particular example, I do not have a named range. So this part, in the last one, I showed you a named range. Here, we're just using that offset to sort of see it directly in the formula. But remember, the indirect, it's just building that dynamic range that includes the two, in this case, the two sheets that we care about, and that range B6 to B100. So if we look in here, let's just click right in here. C6, that's what it's doing. It's saying that is our height, and we're getting two months, month 1 and month 3. And then to those 2 months, or those two sheets called month 1 and month 3, we're concatenating the range B6 to B100. So finally, if we just click in here, you can see below, once again, the range is all of this, and our criteria is simply greater than G7, which is 150. So now we have something pretty interesting where it's much easier. Once we set this up, it's much easier to turn these things off and on. And this formula here is simply saying, if these guys equal on, then give me the row numbers. So row 8 and row 10. Then the rest of the formula just says, well, give me one at a time. First, give me the 8, which is the first one here. And then here it's saying, give me the 10, which is the next row number. Then I'm just saying index, and give me the first one, and give me that third one. So that's how we get these sheets here to be over there, because this month 1 says on, month 3 says on. Woo. So finally, we have our range, which is all of this part that the indirect gives us, all this blue part. And then we have our criteria, which is a little bit off the screen because this formula is getting so much longer. But I could just scroll over to the right, and you see the same thing as before. There's our criteria, our operator, and our value. Now all this is nice, but there's one last thing, and now it's getting to the final level of complexity. How can we change the B6 to B100 range? We're always talking about B6 to B100, but as you can see here, we have different columns, and we never get to row 100. So maybe the data would expand eventually, but we want to say maybe we only care about row 7 to row 12. Maybe we want to add up or count or average these values or only these values. So there is a way to do that. So let's go to the last sheet and we'll take a look at that. So for those of you that are still with me, now we're in this last sheet, and once again we see our months over here. Let's go and type in that month 5. We don't have a month 5 yet, but just so you can see how it works, type it in, press tab. It is already expanded. Our formula is already here, giving us an error. I could turn this to on, but that wouldn't really make sense because this sheet does not exist yet. So let's turn this to off. And let's go back and do the same thing we did before. Here we had month 1 and month 3. So we'll go in here and we'll say, okay, we're going to turn this off. Month 4, we're going to turn that off as well. So once again, we're getting month 1 and month 2 in that offset. Of course, it's using this guy. If I delete this, the formula, the solution won't work anymore. So we still need this guy. All right. Now, we could also put this in the formula, but it would just make it even longer. So let's turn this on. Let's take a look here. So here's our 16. And we see down here, let's not forget, Countif. We just want a range. We want a criteria. But now the indirect, which is building that long string, is even longer, and it's a little bit off the screen. So I'm going to pause the video and just sort of pull things over from the right to the left. So we still don't see all of it, but remember, we're doing a Countif in the end. This is all it is, with a range and a criteria. So our criteria is here off to the right. So here it is. The criteria, the operator, and the value has to be greater than the number in cell G7. So that's easy. All right, so let's go back over to here. We want to show the formula. So here is, this is another thing we could also do. This is the formula we had before. So this is not dynamic yet. This is B6 to B100. It's a little bit easier. But when we go to the cell below, now we're making it longer, which is what we see down here, this long thing here. And we're making our own range. We don't have to stick with B6 to B100, but here we're saying I'm going to click in here and we see what it does. It is picking up the values here in this drop down. We pick column B. That's the first column. And we're also in the next cell picking column I. So watch what happens. I could say only make it go from, let's make this go from column C to column G. Not as wide now. And row, let's say row 6 to row 10. I just type that in, and we see that 46 changes. Anything we do here will change because we're expanding or decreasing that range. So let's make that back to column B where it starts. Now we have a 56. So it is from column B, which is here, to column G, and row 6 to row 10 for all 4 of these sheets, which is kind of neat. But it does take a lot of work and a lot of patience to create this. If you get those errors, reference errors or value errors, yeah, it does get a bit frustrating, but it is possible. So we click back in here. The indirect function, which builds that long string, basically just our range of the sheets of month 1 and month 3 from column B, basically B6 to G10. Instead of B6 to B100, it's B6 to G10. Now, let's watch that 56 grow as I'm going to go over here and turn, let's say, month 2 from off to on. Now it actually didn't change. I wonder why. So let's go into month 2. B6, oh, I see. Okay, so in here, in that particular, let's go to month 2. In that range, we have small numbers. Nothing beats that criteria of 150. So let's bring this back down to, let's say, 5. Now it becomes 87. And if we turn one of these off again, let's turn off month 2, the one in the middle. Now it's back down to 59. Right? Okay, so it is working. So this long string, we're using indirect to make it do, the indirect is doing even more work to, you see this part here where J7, which is right here, and M7, and a colon, and K7 and N7. So all of this stuff together builds basically a string which is similar to the one we see here. This is hard-coded, and down here it's dynamic. So lots of stuff that you can do, but it does get complicated. So really, it would be much easier to have your data stored like this. It would be so easy to do count ifs, average ifs, sum ifs, pretty much anything you want, formulas or pivots. So if you have any questions, just go to my website and leave some comments. Or don't forget, for further reading, you can go to Microsoft's site here or to Better Solutions. This site has been around for a long time, and they've got a ton of good information for studying.